When you think about great RPG or role-playing games with amazing lore, it's almost impossible not to stumble upon something from BioWare in the early 2000s. Series like Knights of the Old Republic, Jade Empire, Dragon Age, and in my opinion, by far the most captivating of them all, Mass Effect. And that's because for the first time in gaming history during the first game's release, it felt like we finally had a huge sci-fi epic that wasn't based on an already popular movie property like Star Wars. An entire universe out there for us to discover with alien species, locales, and stories to tell. However, the real thing that sets Mass Effect apart from its contemporaries isn't the memorable characters or sprawling futuristic locations. Rather, it's the utterly enthralling world building and lore. So much so that there's a literal voice codex with hundreds of entries paragraphs long, all narrated by a silky smooth voice, and people love it. I struggle to think of many other games I can literally do nothing more than just sit and listen to made up stories about the world for hours, but Mass Effect is so fascinating at its core that you simply can never feel like you have learned enough. Everything, down to what people eat and how biotics work from a scientific standpoint, can be carefully studied and understood, along with thousands of years of history including political strife, galactic conquest, and ancient alien artifacts. And speaking of ancient aliens, they're one of my personal favorite things about the setting. This isn't a near future like Starfield composed of mostly humans. In Mass Effect, the Milky Way has been conquered due to a mysterious network of relays that has been discovered by a handful of hyper-intelligent species, most recent of which when we play the games are humans themselves. These relays allow faster than light travel across gargantuan distances in our galaxy, and at the center of it all is what is called the Citadel, a massive space station that is the heart of galactic trade and politics, where a council of other alien species sits that act as important leaders with their hands in all sorts of events across space. And in each of the original trilogy games, we get to visit different parts of this station, all with their own architecture and ways of life. But the most interesting part of each of these encounters is just getting to walk around and really understand the universe more. You can talk with aliens all over and learn about their people, beliefs, and histories. You can read data terminals full of the biggest events in the timeline of the world, or simply bask in the glory of this hulking station full of so much life you've never seen before. And this sense of wonder only gets greater as you explore more and more of the universe. You can fly between multiple solar systems full of stars and planets, and for each of them, you can once again look into the history of every planet and the people that live there, or scan them for materials to look for upgrades. The best planets, though, are those we actually get to land on and run missions. Places like Noveria, Vermeer, Palaven, Mars, Ilium, Thessia, or even Earth's very own moon. And each of these many worlds is home to either massive cities we get to explore outside the Citadel, or missions full of lore and world building that is top-notch. For example, in the first game, you get to visit a haunted planet called Pharos, with buildings that reach high into the sky well above the clouds that have been abandoned and left desolate after a mysterious creature called the Thorian has been discovered when a race of intelligent machines called the Geth attack. Innocent human beings are being turned into mindless husks, and amidst the chaos lies a creature millions of years old that has the power to mind control its hosts and have them do its bidding. On a completely different mission, on a snowy planet like Noveria, you stumble upon an ancient race of bugs called the Rachni that years ago almost spelled the end of the entire galaxy, but were defeated by the Krogan, who in their massive numbers threatened galactic peace, which prompted Solarian scientists and special operatives to create a genophage to make them all infertile. And it's a rich and engrossing history and intrigue like this that makes Mass Effect so special. It really does feel like a living, breathing universe with its own history and people to uncover. Not everything is in service to you as the player. The world is the main character, and because of that, it's so easy to get lost in just trying to understand it all. And it's also why Mass Effect is the only game series in history where I personally listened to and read everything, because the world building is just so outstanding that you literally can't help but want more, especially when all that lore plays a crucial role in the decisions we make. For instance, that genophage I mentioned can be cured in the third game depending on your decisions, or you can choose to let the Krogan species die die because of how dangerous you've seen them be on their home planet of Tuchanka. Or even those small touches like deep dive explanations for how Mass Effect relays work, or how certain species survive on so little food, add so much to the overall experience because it all feels well thought out, well crafted, and real. And at the heart of it all is one of the greatest and most fascinating main stories in a game series of all time, where you slowly unravel that behind this beautiful galaxy is actually a cycle that has been taking place for millions of years, where an ancient machine race of massive ships called the Reapers are awakening from their slumber to rid the galaxy of all organic life over and over. You see, millions of years ago, an apex race called the Leviathans noticed that all of their predecessors had died after they created true artificial intelligence and synthetics, which eventually wiped them out. So the Leviathans created a machine called the Catalyst, meant to bridge the difference between organic life forms and robotic creatures. But with its infinite resources and ability to calculate future probabilities, the Catalyst concluded that organics and synthetics were always meant to be in conflict, and that left to their own devices, organics would overuse all resources in the Milky Way and cause its collapse entirely. So the Reapers were created to purge all organic life every 50,000 years, right as alien civilizations are starting to get hyper advanced. And after killing all intelligent life in the galaxy, the Reapers would leave the more primitive creatures to their own devices to go through the natural stages of evolution to become spacefaring races once again that eventually discover the Mass Effect relays, which lead to the Citadel and a scientific revolution. And I can't express just how amazing lore like this is. I'll never forget playing through the original trilogy for the first time as a kid growing up, and to this day there's not been anything else in sci-fi games, movies, or even books alike that captured me in quite the way that the original Mass Effect trilogy did, where quite literally everything in the game is so interesting. The cultures, the aliens, the main plot, the science and technology, the people you meet, and most of all, the world that takes you by its grasp and never lets go. Mass Effect is so special because it's a series that at its core finds meaning in deep and introspective lore. The kind that will have you sitting on your couch for hours doing nothing more than simply listening and reading to anything you can find. And on top of that, there are tons of different places to visit and explore that give life to the things you have read and listened to, and only add to what is without a doubt one of the most interesting sci-fi settings the gaming medium has ever seen, and one of my personal favorite settings in fiction, period. Torment Tides of Numenera might just have some of the best lore and one of the most mind-bending worlds of all time that almost no one knows about. Taking place over 1 billion years into the Earth's future, you find yourself on a planet now called the Ninth World. You see, before the current time period in the game, there were said to be 8 great spacefaring civilizations that called this planet home, all with their own societies and technologies, but each of these civilizations fell for unknown and mysterious reasons, only to be surpassed by the next. Nowadays, human society has regressed into a near-medieval state, where across the Earth there are now scattered thousands of strange and unbelievable artifacts and sets of technology nicknamed Numenera. Cults have sprung up to worship these artifacts, while other citizens focus on rebuilding lost cities from millions of years ago to help spur on a new golden age. And amidst all of this chaos lies you, the last cast-off. When you begin the game, you awake in this strange city on Earth after quite literally falling out of the sky like a shooting star. And after having some discussions with the local townsfolk, you discover that it's because you are one of the most recently shed bodies from a powerful force known as the Changing God. This one man, now coined a god, was able to reverse engineer old technologies to give himself the power of immortality by simply taking over and creating new host bodies to live in endlessly and shedding his consciousness from one body to the next as time went on. But because of this great power unearthed from this one individual, a formidable cosmic horror known as a Sorrow is chasing him down to kill him, and this means killing his old cast-off bodies as well. So you were tasked with figuring out exactly who you you were before, who you are now, and what the sorrow even is, and most interestingly of all, some of the biggest ancient mysteries of this undying world. And for me personally, I love lore and world building like this, where you slowly get to unravel mysteries that took place thousands or millions of years ago and reveal ancient technologies and civilizations that knew even more than we do now. It's the whole reason I think people in our real lives, like Graham Hancock and his theories on ancient apocalypses, draw so many eyes and attention. People just love the idea of long-forgotten ancient societies that suffered massive apocalypses, only to leave behind clues as to what happened. It hits at the heart of human curiosity, and it's so much cooler than the standard linear narratives of human progression we're often taught, regardless of whether or not it's actually true. And it's that same sense of curiosity and wonder of what's out there, the core of what makes sci-fi as a genre so cool in the first place, that makes Torment Tides of Numenera such an enthralling world to get lost in. On top of that too, there's so many interesting philosophical and technological questions asked with each step you take. And some of the places you go in the latter half of the game are astonishing, like the gaping maw of an interdimensional alien you comb through the depths of, or a spaceship stranded in the dark abyss of the cosmos, forced to build its own society that evolved differently over time. In addition, there's countless interesting sci-fi concepts on offer here as well, like the levies or police force of the main city. These levies are machine-human hybrids who are created by taking 1 year of life from any citizen looking to join the safety of the city's walls. These levies are machine-human hybrids who are created by taking 1 year of consciousness and life from any citizen looking to join the safety of the city's walls, and using that consciousness to power these automatrons to protect and serve. In one mission in the game, you discover a levy who was given a year of consciousness from a man that had committed multiple murders without anyone knowing, and this meant that the levy was perpetually burdened with sadness and guilt and could barely withstand living, while the man had completely cleared his conscience, shedding the horrible year from his mind. And you can either help this levy gain a new year from that same man to end its pain, or decide that since levies are not actually human, that it doesn't matter anyways. And this is just one example of such a strange yet fascinating concept or idea that permeates this game's world and lore. At multiple points, you even come into contact with a massive cult of Numenera worshippers who eat human flesh in order to gain memories of the fallen, all in an attempt to preserve the histories of the world that were forgotten and lost before. And with each of these groups you encounter, big questions about what it means to be human, to be alive, or the importance of knowledge and sacrifice are questioned to you as the player, where your decisions can dramatically impact the world. And as a sucker for ancient civilizations, advanced technology, and big philosophical questions in the stories I consume, Torment Tides of Numenera is literally built atop these foundations. Even walking around the city or new locations you discover along the main story is so engaging, because everywhere you go you will find massive strange structures from Earth's past millions of years ago, and it really makes you think about what these other civilizations must have been like to create technology so beyond our comprehension. Sadly though, the actual game itself is honestly pretty boring to play, with less than stellar combat and a UI that looks like someone tried to physically hurt our eyes. But beneath that all lies a series that is home to one of the coolest sci-fi settings I've ever seen, and asks so many grand and thought-provoking questions for you to answer, all for yourself. And by the way, while I wouldn't necessarily recommend playing this game like a lot of others on this list, if you are interested in hearing a full synopsis of this underrated gem, check out the full hour-long video I made on this channel. It's not one many of you saw, but I think a lot of you would love it. Sometimes the best lore in games doesn't come from great world building and backstories, but from situations and ideas that truly make us think deeply. And in the case of games like this, very few reach the dizzying heights of Paradise Killer. Set in a late-stage dystopia thousands of years in the future, the game sees you playing as a member of what is called the Syndicate, a group of immortal alien beings that have garnered their insurmountable power from a set of cosmic gods they pray to. And through their divine authority, the Syndicate has been designing what they call paradises, artificial islands that are meant to give birth to perfect utopias, where the Syndicate's rich members can forever live in luxury and happiness. But in order to retain this power, the Syndicate must commit blood sacrifices and mass genocide of the less fortunate, in order to appease their grotesque rulers. And this has resulted in now countless paradises falling apart and turning into utter chaos, forcing the Syndicate to once again, through the power of their cosmic gods, tear apart their islands and start anew. In the game, you are playing during the fall of the 24th Paradise Island, with many in the Syndicate wanting to move on to the next sequence quickly, but they're being stopped due to an ongoing murder investigation going on to see who murdered the Council, the ruling body of the Syndicate. As part of the investigation, you are tasked with figuring out where the truth lies. But as interesting as the investigation is, it's the world that it's set in that's truly the star of the show. Because this so-called paradise on the surface seems amazing. Vibrant colors and sounds, rushing waves from a nearby ocean, and grand buildings and hallways that all scream decadence and luxury. However, as you start to explore the island more, you can't help but shake the feeling that something feels off. You eventually start to stumble upon the lower decks of the island, hidden away from sight, that are home to innocent beings being sacrificed to appease the cosmic gods. At one point, you can even find an entire complex covered in blood and gore, with every building and road utterly annihilated. And then it suddenly hits you. The only way this paradise can even exist is on the backs and lives of thousands of tortured individuals. It's a haunting revelation for sure, and the deeper you explore this game and its world, the more striking it becomes. You're constantly asking questions like, can a utopia even exist without the pain and suffering of many? Or even explorations into ideas like systems of government and power being so evil despite the fact that every small part of them has some good. And this all culminates in a game that on the surface is so stylish and retro-futuristic, making you feel happy and at home, yet constantly you cannot escape that feeling that something remarkably sinister is hiding beneath it all. So often in games we see dystopias that are unmistakably evil, but in Paradise Killer, we discover one that does its best to hide all of its inner workings. A commentary on late-stage capitalism where literal blood from sacrificed and tortured souls is traded like currency, and this sanctity of life and culture has been eroded so much that it no longer matters. A futuristic society that finally has embraced the dark secrets that all of us know deep down, that no perfect world exists unless conquered by those who are more fortunate over those who are less. And really, it's a game with a perfect blend of storytelling and philosophy with world building that combine to make a setting that is hard to pull your attention away from. In fact, many of the ideas themselves actually stem from real-world experiments. For example, the 25th Paradise Island the Syndicate wants to move to is an analogy to the real-world John B. Calhoun experiments from the late 60s, which were a series of tests to create a mouse utopia where everything would be perfect, no predators, tons of food and shelter, and no health problems. But in this experiment, eventually under perfect conditions, the mice started to lose their minds, with fights breaking out everywhere and horrifying scenes of mothers literally eating their children, resulting in the experiment being shut down. It's a perfect parallel to what we see happening in this game, and there are so many other parallels just like this too. Because after all, isn't a huge part of great lore the questions that it asks of us, the big mysteries left unanswered, or the philosophical treats that occupy our minds for weeks? For me personally, it's why I love games that focus so much on setting and lore in the first place, because those things stick with you so much more than good gameplay ever could. Remedy Entertainment is no stranger to games with psychotic themes and mind-bending sequences, and considering almost all of them are now part of a bigger connected universe, things only get more wild the more you look into them. But for me, none of the series in this now expansive ensemble, including Alan Wake and Max Payne, hold a candle to the amazing world building and lore behind Control. And that's because Control focuses primarily on the Federal Bureau of Control, or FBC, a top-secret US government agency that has has been tasked with investigating so-called AWEs, or Altered World Events. These events are supernatural and paranormal phenomena happening all around the world, often involving objects of power which are normal everyday items possessed with what can only be described as magic. Things like telephones that can time travel or communicate with entities from the past, an ashtray maze that changes its structure over and over as you move through it, or a floppy disk that can telekinetically lift objects around it. And in order to study these strange objects, the FBC has been tasked with traveling to locations in which the phenomena can be found, often called places of power, and conducting research into what's behind it all. One of the most notable places of power is what is called the Oldest House, the headquarters of the FBC, located in a massive skyscraper in New York City that is only visible and available to those who should see it, part of its dark paranormal nature. Inside this massive Brutalist-inspired dungeon is where you find yourself in the first game, and it serves as the stomping grounds to uncovering more of what's really going on here. The walls and interiors are plain yet striking, and feel as if everything around you was built with a simple yet strict purpose. But dotting these beautiful and unique interiors are also a host of enemies, all stemming from the antagonistic force of the series known as the Hiss, some sort of interdimensional alien presence that has invaded the Oldest House's walls. Every single room you come into feels like a horror movie beginning to start, but that quickly changes when combat hits, and you get to use some of the powers gifted to you in this misunderstood place to tear apart the foundation around you and hurl anything in sight at monsters like you were a master Jedi from Star Wars. And more than anything, this setting really is just so awesome in its own way. I can't even think of any other games out there with a similar sense of dread mixed with the awe you get at the same time, except for other Remedy titles, that is. Because of the writing and how the story is told as well, it constantly feels like you have no idea what's really going on, but in a good way. And you eventually even get to go to places like the Astral Plane, which is a separate dimension only accessible via certain rituals or objects of power that are home to things like the Board, which are a cryptic group of unknown entities looking to unleash havoc. And then when you add on top of that the fact that all of these revelations and lore in this game also carry over to all of Remedy's other recent games, it becomes a massive web of information and mystery to sift through to try and understand. There are entire YouTube channels dedicated to uncovering what is really going on in this connected universe, and even after watching hours of content, I still have no idea what's really happening. But without a doubt, Control sits at the heart of this deep and interesting lore here, centered all around a top secret government entity doing research into the most fantastical and paranormal or unbelievable things you can imagine. It once again is exactly what I find so interesting in lore and world building in games personally, and unlike most other settings, this isn't a massive fantasy open world or sci-fi epic. It plays out more like a noir film with eccentric tones. So if you haven't already dived into the world of the Remedy connected universe, full of some of the strangest and mind-blowing lore and world building out there, there's no better place to start than Control.